Hi everyone, Tony Tonkin here from the Child Protection Party. Glad you could be with me, pardon me, for 2023. We're hoping that this is a far more exciting year and a far more progressive and important year for anybody who's involved in the child protection system. We're hoping to make significant changes right around the state and around Australia in terms of assisting you so that you can get the services, get a voice heard amongst the system that often doesn't hear you at all. So today we'd like you to think about subscribing to the Child Protection Party. If you happen to be watching this on YouTube, where I'm sending it also right at the moment, apart from Facebook, then please subscribe, ring the bell, let us know that you're interested in what it is that we're doing. We want to get those numbers up as well on our YouTube channel. And if you're watching this on Facebook, then we would like you to be able to send to us at the address here any interest that you have. We've got some people interested in New South Wales, incidentally, who want to build a branch in New South Wales. If you're in New South Wales and you want to get involved in that, that's fantastic. Please contact admin@childprotection.party and we'll be able to organise the appropriate information for you to get you started in that area. The same applies for Queensland and all other states for that matter. So get involved with us as best as you can, because that is the only way that you're going to be able to make a difference around the child protection system if you're concerned about kids and improving the outcomes for all children. There are two issues that I wish to talk about today. The first one is family policing. I'll have a brief discussion around that. And then there's an article on the ABC News website about a young person who's recently had a child removed from her, and that raises some considerable concern for me and for the party, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So stick with us. Join with us at the Child Protection Party and become an active member so that you can effectively bring about change where change is required, which is at a legislative level and also in terms of being able to advocate for other people like yourself around the child protection system so that we can make the changes that are required. Sorry, I started this and my voice has gone a little bit husky as a result. We'll be doing more and more of these live feeds throughout this year. If you can, please share this live feed on your Facebook page or on your YouTube channel if you're watching it through YouTube. Now, what I wanted to have a look at is this particular page. Now, we're talking about family policing at the moment, and this is a language that has been developed in the United States and I think the UK in relation to the child protection system itself. So I'm just going to read this out, which I think is a really good description of what family policing is. And so it's about us trying to change the language so that we can better understand what the child protection system actually does and how it impacts the most disadvantaged people in our community. It says here the child welfare system is not a helping system. We know that. Statement without much further explanation required, I think. And the system subjugates, surveils, regulates and punishes families who are disproportionately black and Indigenous. It acts, remembering this is coming from the United States, it's the term black and Indigenous, whereas in Australia it's Indigenous people. It's also people that are immigrants, Sudanese people and people from African countries in particular are often subjugated to the surveillance program that's run by the child protection system. It acts as a family policing system. That's the words that we want to start to use a little bit more and more of. It's a family policing system. The system and its supporters portray family policing as a legitimate, supporting, helping system. So what I need to say about that is that what that means, pardon me, is that the system that sits around child protection is about analysing, putting an eye on, making sure that we're surveilling all those people that are disadvantaged in our community with the view that to take away their children, that they are, because of their circumstances, bad people, bad parents, and therefore shouldn't have their children with them. Now, that system is not just about the child protection system. That system is also about those people that support that system, the NGOs, the people providing early intervention programs, people providing drug and rehab programs, and people dealing with people in general. And particularly here in Australia, Centrelink is an important part of that surveillance system, that family policing system that we're now talking about. So goes on to say the system and its supporters portray family policing as a legitimate supportive helping system, and that protects the safety and well-being of children through necessary state-sanctioned interventions. But the outcomes for children and families are abysmal, whichever way we look at it. How true that is. United States, here, elsewhere around the world, the outcomes are abysmal. Children are have significantly worse outcomes as a result of system involvement. Families do not experience healing, and children are not safer. Ultimately, the impact of the system on children, families and communities underscores the ways in which the system functions to maintain anti-blackness, anti-indigenous in this country, white supremacy, racial capitalism and colonialism. We can collectively do better. Now, this is a program instigated by a social work professor, Dean, I think he is, in the United States. I'm hoping that I'll make contact with him and we'll be able to have a discussion with him further about this family policing system, because we need to eradicate it. We need to make people aware that it exists to start with, and we need to be able to find better ways to manage the system. So there's some thought now in the United States about abolishing the child protection system. We don't advocate for that necessarily, but what we do advocate is for a new view to be taken of the child protection system, so we're not policing families in the way that we do, and we're not removing children at the rate that we are, when a lot of those families could still be managing having the children in their care if the system was prepared to function more appropriately around the type of care that those people need. So this is a conversation we're going to be having more and more over time. So join with us in this as we have this particular conversation. The next article that I want to look at, and I may have to readjust my page here, is an article that was in the, and I will have to adjust my page, so bear with me while I do this. I think that might be a little bit more helpful. Yep. So what this article talks about is a child that was in care and then had to fight to keep her own baby. Now, I've come across this for decades, for as long as I've been doing this work. I can remember one of the first cases I ever came across was a young woman who had been in care, incredibly abused while in care, left care, had a child, and then had that child removed from her. It was one of the first cases I ever had. And I can remember looking at the documentation and reading that children, that one of the risk factors was the fact that she was a child in care. And I guess I became particularly concerned about this because really what it indicated to me was that clearly the person or the organisation or the people that were involved in this child's life was the state. And so what element of responsibility were the state taking in relation to this child? And the answer to that is clearly they were taking none. That at the end of the day, they saw their responsibility around this child and her desire to have a child of her own, and the fact that that was a risk factor, they completely abdicated their responsibility around any of that and just saw her as the problem. And this is where this family policing system is so wrong, because she was more than capable of looking after this kid, but the policing that took place around her, even though she was a state kid herself, meant that the child, that she was declared a bad mother, and the child was therefore removed. And since then, we've had many, many cases where kids that were in care choose to have children, and then often early in their lives, and then as a result of that, they have those children removed, primarily just because they were in care. And Philip Mendez, a social worker academic in Melbourne, also talks about this a little bit more in this article. So it goes on to say, an offspring of the child protection system, Chloe, not a real name, was desperate to have her own baby out of state care, but her son was still taken. When she was 4 years old, Chloe was propping up her mother, calling the ambulance as she lay unconscious or waiting for the police to arrive. When it came out, Chloe was being sexually abused by her mother's ex-partner. DCJ said, and they intervened, and she was taken and she was sent to live with a family member. You could not fault the kinship carers on paper, yet Chloe struggled to find her place in this family. I got to a point where I was self-harming every day. I would just cry myself to sleep. I cried walking to school. I felt like I was better off dead, she said. At 14, she was involuntarily admitted to a Concord Centre for Mental Health in Sydney's West. And I just want to stress the fact that at this particular point, this young person at 14 found herself in a mental institution for 2 years. And apart from this mental institution, one's got to wonder what it was that the department were doing in order to facilitate whatever was happening to this young person. Who knows? Probably nothing apart from locking her away and hoping that whatever the issues are would be resolved. Now, it goes on to say that last few years in care she was passed by in a residential care home, so she was taken out of this kinship care arrangement, tossed into a residential group home once she was out of the hospital. Adulthood arrived abruptly as she awoke on the 18th birthday and was given a few hours to farewell her peers and leave the group home. She was kicked out. In other words, no consideration to how this would be for her, no consideration to how she's going to adjust to the world. She was just turfed out. And how often do we see that? The remaining hours of a milestone birthday were spent in a hotel room organised by a caseworker. From then on, she was couch surfing because this kid was on her own. I had a caseworker chasing me up saying that they had to do a review simply for the fact that I left care a year before she should have, like that would have made any difference. Having always wanted kids, she was excited by expecting, but the pregnancy itself was difficult. I went into the hospital because I was having cramps early on in my pregnancy, and I didn't know if it was a miscarriage or not. I was like a blubbering mess. It was that hospital visit that caused the hospital to call the department. Can I just remind everybody that here's a person who spent 2 years at 14 in an institutional hospital. And as a result of that, one can understand how she may have felt about being in hospital on this occasion, given her past experiences around being hospitalised. I can't stand up there. I can't say no. How high do you want me to jump kind of thing is what she's saying. After the baby was born, Chloe said the department found a conflict between her partner and her mother was grounds to remove her son. Desperate to get him back, Chloe, now 20, completed a parenting course, and about 2 months later, her child was returned to her care. He's remained there ever since. The DCJ said it was unable to comment on specific child events, blah, 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 it's sort of stuff they say. So, and this is where the issue comes in, that young people leaving care, they say, this is what the department says, will now receive additional support from 2023. They should have been doing this for the last decade or so, but they don't. And then the question is, what sort of additional support do they get when they're leaving care? What about all the support they require while they were in care in the first place? Where's all that gone? Well, obviously that's not all that relevant. Monash University professor Philip Mendez, who studied how young people transition from out-of-home care, said former wards of the state were at risk of intergenerational involvement with child protection. They're more likely to come under attention. The surveillance that we talked about, this family policing thing, is what they're likely to come under. because they will be known to the department. That is so true. That surveillance bias has been documented around the world. The Child Protection does tend to look more closely at parents who are in out-of-home care or who are still in out-of-home care. The department said, depending on circumstances, some young people will need to be assisted by their carers to look after their child. Very rarely do we see that happen. So, I think you're, frankly, living in a fairy tale world. Mendez said across the world, a disproportionate number of care leavers tending to become young parents. And he talks about the reason why this is so. I'm not saying that they're not good parents, that they don't have the capacity to be good parents, says Mendez. Many of them become very, very good parents, and I've noticed that as well, even though some of those same parents will have their children removed. But there are a whole range of structural and systemic issues why they are more likely to become young parents and why that parenting task may be tougher for them. He said the main reason for early parenthood among care leavers was the absence of supportive adults. How true. Like a lot of these kids that live in these care homes, these residential care facilities, will often find that they've got other young people, in their early 20s, whatever, looking after them, youth workers and so forth, and that none of them exhibit parenting capacity in any reasonable way, and therefore the young people don't get to understand what parenting looks like because they're not living within a family to start with, and it's chaotic in some of these residential care homes, and the people that are working there come and go, and there's lots of them. So clearly they're not being taught how to parent, and the department seems to ignore that and perhaps should acknowledge it more often. Many of them are still grieving the loss of their own family, and that is an issue which never gets addressed. In some cases, they'll seek to replace that family by finding other people that they believe, and often erroneously, do love them and care for them, and often those people wind up being abused by the people that they're seeking that family connection with. Giving birth to a child you think you love and you provide that love that you've lost can seem to be something that would be good. He also goes on to say a major reason why care leavers become involved with child protection authorities is because their material needs were never being met. Neglect often corresponds with financial disadvantage, with lack of access to good housing, lack of access to a reasonable income. And many care leavers, whether they're parents or not parents, would often fall into this category. It said the federal government should benchmark national model that ensured care leavers in every state and territory receive financial and housing support until they turn 21. I would advocate that should be until they turn 25. Urged the government to consider whether the level of support other young people in the community were able to provide for their children was available to former kids in care. And I think one of the primary issues for me is that the government is unaware of the impact that they have on the outcomes for many of these kids. And what is it like to know, like if you think a lot of these young people live in domestic violence relationships, they're abused in other ways, and then they have the government step in, their so-called parent, who insists on abusing them even further by taking away the child. Now, I know for a fact that many of the people that I work with who are young, who have children, simply desire to have somebody in their lives that loves them unconditionally. And you get that from a child. So the need to have children is understandable under these circumstances because the need to be loved is so strong and so intense. So if you've got any thoughts around all of that, please let us know. If you would like to contact us, you can contact us here. And if you're watching us on YouTube, then we'd like you to subscribe to us as well. And what we'd like you to do is to register with the party as soon as you can, become involved with us. We have a great drive towards that this year. If we're going to have representation in Parliament, we need your support to do so. There's an election in March, which we won't be able to participate in because we haven't got enough members to have membership in New South Wales. So, and this is one of the reasons why we need to build up our support and have you involved with us. If you wish to make a change within the child protection system, then we need you involved in it as well. Just having a look at some Christian mum and parents involved with CPS are not free to choose friends or supports. Everyone involved in our lives come under the scrutiny and judgment of CPS. Anyone with a history of any kind, such as with CPS, police, mental health, drug use, alcohol, and so on, redeem themselves, is not apparently able to redeem themselves. So true, Kristen, love it. It makes creating and finding that support network everyone's needs very difficult. Absolutely. Good comment. If you've got, and hi Kat, good, thank you for joining us as well. If you've got any further comments, please let us know. Add them to this as well. And I don't understand why that's coming up the way that it is. So let us know, and we can have a further chat. So we'll be making more of these. If you've got comments and you'd like to be able to become involved with us, and you'd like to be able to get on to us and talk in this way and have a conversation with us about what's happening for you, then we'd be more than delighted to hear from you. So thanks everybody for being here. Take care, look after yourselves, and more importantly, be safe.